The rain fell hard on the steel roofs of the outer colony. Each drop echoed through the empty streets, where no one dared to walk after nightfall. In one small shelter at the edge of the ruins, a human named Ethan Ward sat beside a flickering heater. He had been alone for months, maybe years. After the Krell Dominion destroyed the trade routes, most people left this world. Ethan stayed behind, repairing old machines and scavenging for food. It was quiet, cold, and lonely, but he had grown used to it. Outside, lightning flashed across the black sky. The wind howled through broken towers like a wounded animal. Ethan lifted his head when a strange sound reached his ears. A single knock, soft but clear, echoed from his front door. He froze, his hand resting on the metal table. No one ever came this far. Not in the middle of the night. He listened again. And there it was, a second knock, louder this time. He reached for his old plasma pistol and moved slowly to the door. Through the small glass panel, he saw a shadow. Someone stood outside in the rain, shivering. Ethan's instincts screamed danger, but curiosity pushed him forward. He unsealed the lock and opened the door a little. A figure stumbled inside. Falling to her knees, her clothes were torn, soaked and covered in dust when she lifted her face. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. She was not human. Her skin glowed faintly under the dim light, a soft silver-blue hue that shimmered with each movement. Her eyes were large and violet, filled with fear and exhaustion. She tried to speak, but her voice trembled. "Please, I need shelter," she whispered. "I'll pretend to be your wife. Just let me stay." Ethan stared. Unsure if he had heard her right, the sentence sounded desperate. Strange and completely out of place, he lowered his weapon slightly. Still cautious, "What did you say?" he asked quietly. She looked up, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "They are hunting me," she said. "If they find me alone, they'll take me away. But if I am registered as someone's partner, a human's wife, they won't look twice." Ethan frowned. Unsure whether to believe her, he had heard stories about refugees from alien fleets, people captured and sold as experiments or slaves. Her kind, he realized, might be one of them. She was trembling uncontrollably, clutching her thin jacket around her. Outside, thunder rolled again. Shaking the ground, Ethan sighed deeply. He couldn't just throw her out, no matter who she was. "All right," he said at last. "Get inside before you freeze." She looked up in disbelief, her eyes wide. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice almost breaking. He closed the door and sealed it. Turning off the outside sensors, she stood near the heater, her silver skin steaming as the warmth touched her. Ethan poured a small cup of water and handed it to her. She drank slowly, hands shaking. After a long silence, he asked, "What's your name?" "Alira," she replied softly. "I come from the Ellerin colonies." Ethan nodded, pretending to understand. He had never met an Ellerin before, only seen their pictures in old data archives. Her clothes were torn and her feet bare, marked with burns and cuts. He gave her an old blanket and pointed to the couch. "You can sleep there," he said. "But tomorrow we figure out what to do." She nodded weakly and lay down. Still trembling, Ethan turned away. Sitting near the door with his pistol on the table, he didn't trust her yet. But something inside him said she wasn't lying. Hours passed, the storm grew stronger. The power flickered, and Ethan stayed awake, listening to the wind and the soft breathing behind him. He thought about her words again. "I'll pretend to be your wife." Why would anyone say that to a stranger? Was it a trick, or was she really running from something far worse than him? When the first light of dawn slipped through the cracks, Ethan stood and checked the scanners. No signals, no patrols, nothing unusual. He turned to look at her, still asleep on the couch. Her face looked peaceful now. No fear, no pain. He realized how fragile she seemed, like someone who had lost everything. He sighed quietly and turned back to his tools. He didn't know who she was or why fate had brought her to his door. But deep down, he knew one thing. This was only the beginning. The knock at midnight had changed his quiet life forever. The storm had ended by morning. Leaving the sky a pale gray, Ethan stood near the window, watching the mist roll over the hills behind him. The soft sound of movement came from the couch. Alira sat up slowly, her silver hair tangled, eyes blinking at the light. For a moment she looked lost, like she didn't know where she was. Then she saw him and whispered, "You didn't throw me out." Ethan gave a small shrug. Didn't seem right to leave someone freezing. She smiled faintly. A weak but honest smile. He poured her a small bowl of reheated soup and handed it over. She ate quietly, glancing around the room filled with tools, wires, and old Terran tech. "You live here alone?" she asked softly. "Yeah," Ethan replied. "Been that way for a long time." Alira lowered her eyes. "I used to have a home, too." There was silence after that, the kind that carried too many memories. Later that day, Ethan worked on fixing a damaged generator outside. Alira followed him, helping without being asked. She moved with strange grace, even in exhaustion. Her hands glowed faintly when she touched the power cells. And for a moment, the machine hummed back to life. Ethan stepped back in surprise. "How did you do that?" She quickly pulled her hands away. "It's just something my kind can do." He didn't press further, but curiosity burned in his mind. What kind of power was that? And what had she really run from? By nightfall, she had cleaned the small shelter and fixed the broken water pipe in the kitchen. Ethan noticed she was useful, quiet, and not afraid of hard work. Still, there was something hidden behind her calm eyes. Something heavy, like a secret she carried alone. He sat across from her during dinner and finally asked, "You said last night they were hunting you. Who exactly is they?" Her spoon froze midway, and her voice turned cold. "The Dominion," she whispered. "They capture my people, call us assets. They sell us to governments for research or war." Ethan clenched his jaw, remembering the old reports. The Dominion treated entire species as tools. He looked at her again, seeing the marks on her wrists, faint metallic scars. "What did they want from you?" he asked. Her voice cracked. "My energy, my blood. My kind can channel biocurrent through matter. They wanted to use it for weapons." Ethan stayed silent for a moment, then said quietly, "You escaped." She nodded slowly. "Barely." Her eyes filled with tears. "They'll come for me again." Ethan thought for a long moment. "You can stay here," he said finally, "but only if you tell me the truth next time." Alira looked up in shock. "You'd really let me stay?" He nodded once. "You needed help, and I've got space." Her lips trembled, and she whispered, "Thank you." Ethan. That night, he lay awake again, hearing the soft hum of her breathing from the other side of the room. He didn't understand why he trusted her. Maybe it was the way she spoke, or the sadness in her eyes. Whatever it was, it made him lower his guard just a little the next morning. A low tone echoed through the shelter the perimeter alarm. Ethan rushed to the console, scanning the feed. A patrol drone hovered in the distance, sweeping the area with red sensors. Alira stiffened instantly, fear flashing across her face. "They found me," she whispered. "Stay down," Ethan ordered, moving fast to jam the signal. He pulled a tarp over the window and disabled the beacon. Minutes passed like hours as the drone floated closer. Scanning the ruins, then, with a mechanical whine, it turned and flew away. Ethan exhaled slowly. That was close. Alira's hands shook, tiny sparks of silver light leaking from her palms. Your energy, he said quietly. It reacts when you're scared, she nodded. Unable to speak, he crouched beside her and said, If you want to stay alive, you'll need to control it. Her voice was barely a whisper. Teach me. That night, Ethan sat by the heater, teaching her to breathe slow and steady, to focus her pulse, to calm the storm inside as she practiced. The faint light around her began to dim. He watched quietly, realizing something he hadn't before. This woman, this alien fugitive, wasn't just running from danger. She was running from what she was, as she finally fell asleep. Ethan looked at the door where she had once knocked in the rain. He knew now that letting her in wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a choice that would change everything, because whoever was hunting her wouldn't stop, and he was no longer just a lonely man in a broken colony. He was her only shelter, and soon he might be her only shield. 3 days passed in uneasy calm. Alira stayed inside most of the time, repairing small things around the shelter, while Ethan worked on strengthening the defense grid. He had rerouted the old Terran scanners to detect high-frequency signals, hoping to catch any Dominion trace before it reached them. The air felt heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ruined skyline, Ethan noticed a faint blinking light on the console. The signal monitor had caught something. He leaned closer, heart thudding, a trace pulse. Faint but real and encoded Dominion frequency. They found the region, he muttered. Alira rushed to his side, her silver eyes wide with panic. They have my code, she whispered. They use it to track my kind by our DNA signature. Ethan's expression hardened. How long before they arrive? Hours, she said, voice trembling. Maybe less, without a word. Ethan moved to the back of the shelter, dragging out an old Terran cum-shield generator. It was broken, covered in dust, but he knew how to fix it. Alira followed him, hands shaking. Can it hide me? She asked. If I can get it running, he replied. But it needs a power surge strong enough to burn the tracker out. She looked down at her hands, glowing faintly with soft blue light. I can do that, she whispered. Ethan hesitated. You could overload. She shook her head. If I don't, they'll find us both. He nodded once. Trusting her completely now, together, they worked through the night, connecting wires and fusing energy cells. Alira stood beside the machine, placing her palms on the core, her energy flowing through the circuits like lightning. The shelter shook, sparks flying across the metal floor. The air filled with static and heat. Ethan watched as the machine's lights turned bright green. It's working, he shouted, but Alira screamed, her body glowing with painful intensity. He rushed to pull her back, the power bursting in a wave of light. Then silence. Smoke curled through the room. The smell of ozone heavy in the air. Alira collapsed, barely breathing. Ethan caught her and laid her gently on the floor. Her pulse flickered weakly beneath her skin, but the tracker signal on the console was gone. He exhaled shakily. You did it. Hours later. She opened her eyes, voice faint. Did it work? She asked. Ethan smiled tiredly. Yeah. You burned their signal out completely. Tears welled in her eyes. Then they won't find us. He nodded. Not easily. She sat up slowly, wincing. I didn't lie, she said softly. I really meant it when I said I'd be your wife if you gave me shelter. Ethan froze. Confused, she continued. In my people's law, a bond between two souls protects both from being claimed by the Dominion. It's an old rule, but still recognized by their code scanners. He blinked, processing her words. So when you said you'd pretend to be my wife, he said slowly. It wasn't just a lie, Alira nodded. It was the only way to survive. Ethan leaned back, rubbing his forehead. "So now what?" he asked. She looked down shyly. "If the Dominion scans this region again, they'll read my life signature as linked with yours. And they won't investigate further." He chuckled softly. "Guess I'm officially married to a fugitive alien now." Alira smiled faintly. The first real smile he had seen from her. "Don't worry," she whispered. "It's only on paper." Ethan looked at her for a long time and said quietly, "Maybe, but paper means a lot these days." That night, the sky outside filled with moving lights. Through the mist, the shadow of a Dominion scout ship glided silently across the horizon. Ethan killed the interior lights, holding his breath. The hum of the ship passed overhead, red beams sweeping across the landscape. Inside the shelter, Alira clutched his arm tightly. Her body trembling, the beams stopped for a moment, paused on their position, then moved away. They waited several minutes before exhaling. "They're gone," Ethan whispered. Alira buried her face in her hands, tears streaming down. "I can't keep running like this," she said, voice breaking. Ethan's tone was steady but soft. "Then stop running. Stay here. We'll find a way." She looked up at him, eyes shining with both fear and hope. "You'd risk your life for me?" she asked. He gave a small nod. "Already have." That night, as the two sat near the fading heater, the wind howled outside once more. But the silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with something fragile, something human. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel alone, and deep inside, Alira began to believe she had finally found what she was searching for. Not just safety, but something far more powerful. A home, yet beyond the clouds, the Dominion ship sent a final encrypted pulse before leaving orbit. The signal reached a distant command center, light years away, and a cold mechanical voice answered back. "Target identified. Prepare extraction unit." The hunters were not finished yet. They had found her trail again. And next time, they would come in force. Days turned into weeks. And life inside the small shelter slowly changed. Ethan had rebuilt the generator, reinforced the walls, and created a hidden bunker below the floor. Alira helped him every day, her energy healing broken circuits and powering old Terran tech that had not worked for years. She smiled more often now, though sadness still lingered behind her silver eyes. Sometimes, when she laughed softly, the air itself seemed lighter. Ethan found himself watching her in quiet moments, the way her hair shimmered in the light, or how she hummed a strange melody when she worked. He had told himself not to grow attached. But that promise faded more each day. Alira noticed too. Though she said nothing, every evening, they sat near the heater, sharing stories. He told her about Earth, about blue oceans and green forests. She told him about her homeworld, Ellerin, where crystal fields stretched to the horizon, and the air glowed with soft color. Both worlds were gone now, one lost to war, the other abandoned to silence. One night, as the wind howled outside, Ethan asked quietly, "Alira, why did the Dominion wipe out your people?" Her expression darkened, her voice low. "They feared what we could become," she said. "Silverkin were born with energy inside us. Pure biolight, we could heal, power machines, or destroy them." She looked at her hands glowing faintly. "They wanted to control us. But my people refused." Ethan listened, anger rising in his chest. "They turned your gift into a weapon," he said softly. She nodded sadly. "And when we resisted, they burned our cities." Silence filled the room for a long time. Broken only by the storm outside, Ethan finally said, "You're not a weapon, Alira. You're proof that not everything powerful must destroy." She looked at him, her eyes wet. "No one ever said that to me before," she whispered. He smiled slightly. "Then I'm glad I did." Over the next few days, Alira learned to control her energy better. Ethan built a training module from scrap metal, and together they tested how far she could push her limits. Her power pulsed like light through water, beautiful and dangerous. Sometimes when she lost focus, objects around her would rise slowly into the air, glowing faintly before settling down again. Ethan guided her gently each time, his voice calm and steady. "Breathe, focus, don't fight it. Let it flow," he said. She followed his words, learning to channel the current within her. During one lesson, her energy burst unexpectedly. Knocking Ethan to the floor, she rushed to him, terrified. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean." He laughed weakly. "Guess that's one way to test armor." Her panic turned to laughter too, soft and nervous, without thinking. She reached out and touched his cheek. Her touch was warm, gentle, filled with light. For a heartbeat, Ethan saw something her memories, her fear, her loneliness, and she saw his pain. The years of silence and loss, the bond between them awakened in that moment. Not by choice, but by truth, they both stepped back, stunned. "What was that?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Our minds linked," Alira said softly. "It happens when trust is real." Ethan swallowed hard. "So now you can read my thoughts. Only what you allow," she said, smiling faintly. He chuckled nervously. "Guess I should stop thinking embarrassing things then." She laughed quietly. "Too late. For the first time in years." Ethan laughed too, really laughed. It felt strange but right. Like something inside him had finally healed. That night, they sat closer than before. Silence between them filled with warmth instead of fear. Outside, the stars shimmered faintly through the thin clouds. Alira rested her head on his shoulder, whispering, "Ethan, if the Dominion comes back, they'll destroy this place." He looked at her and said calmly, "Then we fight." She shook her head. "You can't fight them alone." He smiled. "I won't be alone for a moment." Their eyes met, and words were no longer needed. The bond between them pulsed softly, glowing faintly through their skin. In that quiet room, two souls, one human. One alien became something more. Not just survivors, but a promise of something new. Far above the planet, deep in orbit, the Dominion flagship received the last transmission from the Scout. The signal identified a hidden energy source stronger than any standard weapon. A mechanical voice reported, "Target reacquired. Deploying ground units." In the darkness, engines roared to life. The hunters were coming again, and this time, they would not stop until Alira was captured or dead. Down below, Ethan felt a faint vibration through the ground. He looked at Alira, eyes narrowing. "They've found us," he said quietly. She stood, light already gathering around her hands. "Then let them come," she whispered. "This time we fight together." Outside, the night turned red as dropships pierced the sky like falling stars. The storm of fate had returned. But neither of them were running anymore. This was their stand. This was the bond that would decide everything. The sky burned red as the first Dominion dropships entered the atmosphere. Ethan stood outside the shelter, the cold wind pushing against his face. Beside him, Alira's silver aura shimmered brighter with every heartbeat. She could feel the hunters closing in, their scanners searching for her pulse of energy. Ethan checked the charge on his rifle. Steady but grim. "This is it," he said quietly. "No more running." Alira looked at him, fear in her eyes but strength in her voice. "Then we make them remember what it means to corner a human." The ground trembled as ships landed in the valley below. Dozens of metal soldiers marched forward, their red optics cutting through the fog. Ethan activated the defense grid he had built from old Terran tech. Electric arcs flickered across the ridge. Forming a glowing barrier of light, Alira stepped forward, energy forming around her hands like liquid silver. "You ready?" Ethan asked. She nodded. Always, when the first wave came, the sky filled with blaster fire, Ethan moved fast, shooting with perfect precision. Every bolt hitting its mark, Alira raised her hands. Her energy swirling like a storm, she sent a wave of silver light across the battlefield. Melting metal and shorting circuits, the machines stumbled, their armor turning white-hot before exploding. Ethan ducked behind cover, shouting, "That's it! Keep it up!" But more came, hundreds this time. The Dominion wanted her alive, but they didn't care how many died trying. Alira's strength began to fade, her knees shaking. She gasped. "Too many." Ethan ran to her, pulling her close. "Then we end it together," he said. He connected the power cable from her wrist to the generator behind them. Her eyes widened. "Ethan, it'll overload." "That's the point," he replied. "Let's show them what a human and a Silverkin can do." Together they channeled the power, their bond glowing through their skin. Light burst outward like the heart of a star. The shockwave tore through the valley, ripping the Dominion army apart. Ships exploded in the air, their engines howling as they crashed into the mountains. The ground shook for miles, and then silence fell. Smoke curled into the morning sky. Ethan dropped to one knee. Gasping for breath, Alira fell beside him, her glow fading to a soft shimmer. He caught her in his arms, whispering, "Stay with me." She smiled weakly. "You?" "Kept your promise." He brushed the dust from her face. "Told you I would." For a long time neither spoke. Only the wind and the crackling of burning metal filled the air. When the smoke cleared, the valley lay silent. Dominion forces were gone, their machines destroyed. The small shelter stood half collapsed, but still standing. Ethan carried Alira inside and laid her on the couch where it had all begun. Her breathing was shallow but steady. She opened her eyes slowly. "Did we win?" Ethan smiled faintly. "We survived. That's close enough." Outside, dawn broke across the horizon, painting the ruins gold. Alira reached out and took his hand. "You gave me more than shelter," she whispered. "You gave me hope." He squeezed her hand gently. "And you gave me a reason to fight again, for the first time." Both of them felt peace, two souls from different worlds, bound by light and courage. The war was not over, but something new had begun far above. In the remains of the Dominion fleet, one transmission flickered to life, unit destroyed. "Target missing," said a cold machine voice. A pause followed, then another voice replied, deeper and human. "Then we'll let them think she's gone," it said. "They've earned their silence." Back on the surface, Ethan and Alira watched the rising sun. The world was quiet again. The last shelter still stood, scarred but unbroken, and within it lived a human and an alien woman who had found each other in the dark. A promise formed between them, silent but eternal. Whatever came next, they would face it together, because sometimes the strongest weapon in the galaxy isn't steel or fire. It's compassion and the courage to open a door on a stormy night.